What is going on, everyone? It is Nico, but you probably know me a lot better as Elite Takes. Now that the NFL offseason is underway, I'm going to be making more YouTube videos, so make sure to support by liking and subscribing so that I can do more of this long-form content. And I figured what better way to kick things off than by doing a post-Super Bowl mock draft now that the full draft order has been settled in the first round. So without further ado, it is time to cook. Alright, so the Titans have the #1 pick, and there is a lot of mystery as to what they will do. Some people think they're going to go quarterback and replace Will Levis because Brian Callahan did not seem to be a big fan of Levis running his offense this year. That's for sure. But recently, the president of football operations, Chad Brinker, said publicly that we will not pass on a generational talent with the #1 pick. And to me, that suggests that the Titans could be taking a best player available approach. Just take the guy that they think is most likely to be a star piece for them, regardless of the position they play and their need for quarterbacks. So to me, if we're just taking the best player available, if we're searching for the most generationally talented guy, Travis Hunter is your guy. And especially for the Titans, they need receiver, they need corner. I personally would just make him a full-time corner. I think he's very talented there, and it's just a lot harder to find ultra-talented corners than it is receivers at this point. But nonetheless, I think Travis Hunter is their guy if they're going to go best player available. So yeah, Travis Hunter, #1 overall pick to the Titans. And then we get the Browns at #2. And I am going to do a monster of a trade. Yes, with recently Myles Garrett requesting the trade. I'm not totally sure if the Browns are going to honor it. I think they would be smart too because it's just a great way to go into a real rebuild. I think Myles Garrett is still a great player. He still has great years ahead of him, but by the time the Browns really get this thing right with their cap situation, it's just not very likely that he's going to be that valuable to him. I think this is the perfect time to ship him off. And to me, there is no team that should be more aggressive for Myles Garrett than the Buffalo Bills. The team that just continuously loses to the Chiefs in the playoffs. They need something to get them over the hump. I don't think if you keep running it back with Josh Allen, the odds are in your favor unless you start to get more star power on this team. And I think that the thing that has struggled the most for the Bills in these playoff games really is their pass rush. They just really have not affected Patrick Mahomes. But if you bring in Myles Garrett, there is going to be a difference there for sure. So I think that they should do whatever they can to get him in the building. And in this case, we are going to do a package with their first-round pick this year, their first-round pick next year, and I think you also throw in the piece of Greg Rousseau at edge. He's a solid edge, but this is the upgrade that you want to make. And I don't think that they would be able to pay Rousseau as well. Myles Garrett is a massive contract, but I really think the Bills should find a way to make this work. And they probably would have to throw in a little bit more in terms of draft compensation, but I'm not really going to tinker with that too much. I'm just going to say that this right here is the trade. Let's add Myles Garrett in there for the Browns. I think the Bills are the team that should be most aggressive for him. You can argue the Commanders too because they just have so much money to work with. But to me, Myles Garrett on the Bills, that would really make a difference for them. Then they could really maybe be the favorites in the AFC. So I am going to do this. Myles Garrett to the Bills. And now the Browns get multiple extra firsts. They'll be picking at 30 later in this mock draft. They get a nice young piece in Greg Rousseau. And they're still up at #2. And after trading Myles Garrett, what else are you going to do other than take Abdul Carter, the best edge rusher in this draft? He can give them some serious juice off the edge. I think he probably is the second best player in this draft. You can argue Mason Graham, but I really just think with the opening at edge, you get Abdul Carter and Greg Rousseau and new draft picks, and you get off that money, and you can really rebuild now. You don't have to force a quarterback with the #2 pick. I think that's a good outcome for the Browns. I do not think that any Browns fan should be upset with that whatsoever, and I really don't know why the front office would keep Myles Garrett in the building. So yes, they trade Myles Garrett to the Bills, Abdul Carter at #2, and now the Giants are up at #3. Now, I've seen some rumors that the Giants might trade for Matthew Stafford, and I think that Matthew Stafford would be a big success in that Giants offense. They are kind of ready to go. I think, people know about Malik Neighbors, but that Giants team has solid pass protection. When Andrew Thomas was healthy and on the field, they were a very solid unit. They have Tyrone Tracy. I think Brian Dable is a good offensive mind if you give him a talented quarterback to work with. I think this is a situation where a quarterback can really come in and have a solid chance to succeed. Even though the Giants get a lot of hate, even though they're picking very high in this draft, even though they only won 3 games last year, this thing could get going into competency a little quicker and a little easier than most people might think. So I think if you're the Giants at 3, You could consider trading for Stafford. You could just take the best player available, but realistically, I don't really know why the Rams would trade him, so I'm not going to put that in my mock draft. I think the Rams would be wise to keep him around, draft a young quarterback to develop under him, and, I just really don't see why they can't run it back with him next year and be a serious threat in the NFC. So we're just going to assume they don't trade for Matthew Stafford here. We're going to assume that they just make their pick at number 3, and they do need the quarterback. And I think that taking Cam Ward with the number 3 pick is fine if you're the Giants, because it is a really solid environment for him. I think he's the type of playmaking quarterback that Brian Daboll might really enjoy, who's confident enough to rip it. He has some similar mannerisms to what Josh Allen gave Daboll in Buffalo, with just all of his playmaking ability and his confidence to make off-platform throws. And for a desperate regime that needs to kind of prove to John Mara, the owner, that they have some life, Cam Ward is a way to do it. I think he could come into that offense and have success because they could give him time. He had a lot of time at Miami. I wouldn't like him behind a bad offensive line for that reason, but I think the Giants can provide him with the structure that he needs for this to be a solid pick. All right, so the New England Patriots are up at number 4, and this is a tough one. But here's what I will say. After hiring Mike Vrabel, I believe, has preached that he loves violence on defense. And that checks out. Like, if you watch the Titans for many years, they just had a ferocious defensive line, really led by Jeffrey Simmons, who had some amazing years and was really the anchor of that defense. And, I know the Patriots have Drake May, and they want to support him, and their offensive line is really bad, and they could use more juice at receiver. But man, it's just really tempting to get a guy as good as Mason Graham with Christian Barmore maybe coming back. And you can really just shore up that defensive line and get the best player available here. The Patriots are so far off. They should just be prioritizing talent. You can sign free agent offensive linemen. And frankly, I think if you're going to protect Drake May, you probably shouldn't be relying on like a rookie lineman that you're probably going to have to reach on at the spot. I can see the argument for receiver, but I'm going to go Mason Graham. Get someone violent on defense, really build up their identity in the trenches. I like that for the Patriots. That's a win. All right, so the Jags at number 5 with Liam Cohen coming in here, they could be looking for more offensive firepower. They could go receiver. I really think they could. Outside of Brian Thomas Jr., you got Gabe Davis and Christian Kirk. Those guys are older. They're not amazing. You could go Ted McMillan. But I'm going to go Will Johnson because this defense really struggled even though they have talent on the defensive line last year. I think it'd just be nice to get another solid corner alongside Tyson Campbell on the boundary. Will Johnson is a really great player. I'm not totally sure how he'll fit into the new system with Anthony Campanile as defensive coordinator, but I just like that for the Jags. Get another talented guy on defense. Trust that Liam Cohen can make the pieces work with Trevor and Etienne and Brian Thomas Jr. And guys like that on offense. I think Will Johnson is a great start to the new era in Jacksonville. All right, so the Raiders at number 6. I know what I'm going to do here, and I want to preface this by saying this is not what I would do. I do not think that this is the course of action for the Raiders. I think even though they don't have a quarterback right now, they shouldn't just force Shedeur. But man, I know that Tom Brady has a good relationship with Shedeur Sanders, and I know that they do need a quarterback, and I know that this new regime probably wants to make a splash to start things off, and I know that Shedeur is viewed highly. I really think that he could be picked this high, even though PFF has him as number 42 on their big board. It's not what I would do, to be honest. I think if you're Vegas, you might be looking for more firepower at receiver. Maybe take McMillan or Luther Burden. But, it's just what I think would happen. I think they would take Shedeur Sanders, and that's really that, Okay, so the Jets at number 7. This is a bold one. This is a little outside the box. I don't see many people saying this for the Jets. But man, I'm going to take Tyler Warren. I think Tyler Warren is a really special tight end when you think about what he can do as both a receiver and a blocker. Like, he is really a phenomenal blocker. And, you think about the Jets, I think they just need to get some tone setters with Aaron Glenn as head coach. They bring in Tanner Inkstrand as offensive coordinator. They bring in the Lions tight end coach as the offensive line coach. Like, I think they're going to want some tone setters in the trenches, really physical offensive stars, and I think Tyler Warren could be an amazing tight end for them. They don't really have that guy yet. Like, they have Tyler Conklin in there. I think Tyler Warren at number 7, if you're the Jets, you're just going best player available, in my opinion. This is not a team that needs to be trying to compete immediately with Aaron Glenn. Take a similar approach to Detroit, where they just built that thing up patiently, but they got their tone setters, they got their physical guys, they got their reliable guys, and I think Tyler Warren could really be a special tight end for them and really help them with what they want to do up front in the run game and in the passing game. You know that they love to use their tight ends in that Lions offensive scheme with Sam Laporta, and I just think it's a very reasonable pick for the Jets. Haven't seen many people say it. I have seen others throw it out. But I just think Tyler Warren makes a lot of sense there. All right, so the Panthers at number 8. In my opinion, the Panthers are so fun because Bryce Young had an amazing end to the season. He truly looked awesome. They don't have to worry about quarterback at all. In fact, they have a lot of nice pieces on offense. Their offensive line is good. Dave Canales is a good mind, and some of their young weapons I have hope for. Xavier Legette had some bad drops, but I really do think that he is going to be a dynamite talent. They got JT Sanders, they got Chuba Hubbard. I'm a big Jalen Coker guy, so they got to go defense. Their defense was horrific last year. They really have very little life there besides Derek Brown coming back. I think they do need to go defensive player, and a lot of people have said, once Mason Graham and Will Johnson and Abdul Carter and Travis Hunter go off the board, the Panthers would be reaching at number 8 to take a defensive player. I disagree with that notion. I don't think that you just have to take Ted McMillan because there isn't a defensive player worth this pick. I think there is, and it's James Pierce Jr. out of Tennessee. I really do not understand why James Pierce is getting so underrated. He had so much number 1 pick hype going into the season, and, a lot of people were concerned about his run defense. And very quickly, people just became very low on him because there's this narrative that because he's undersized, he can't defend the run. Well, James Pierce had a much better year this year defending the run, and he's just like a game wrecker as a pass rusher. Like, if you watch the tape, he is really getting home. He is really a force. I think if he comes into Carolina, he could be a really great pass rusher. He is a little bit similar to what Brian Burns used to give them, and I think that is worth the number 8 pick. I do not think that you should overthink a productive game record coming out of the SEC, and he's a young guy, and he's had multiple really dynamite years. So I think James Pierce Jr. makes a ton of sense for the Panthers. And, at number 9, their divisional rivals, the Saints, are up. They just hired Kellen Moore. They need more juice on offense. Chris Olave is great, but who knows what's going on with him and all those concussions. Rashid Shaheed, I love. Who knows if he's really a serious wide receiver too? I think they need more offensive firepower. I think this is just a team deprived of talent right now. You can really just take the best player available in a way. I wouldn't take Genty, but I am going to take Ted McMillan here. I just think that for Kellen Moore's offense, you just want more star power. You just want more high-level talent, and I think that's a win for the Saints. You get a little more security at the wide receiver position. This is where I think Ted McMillan is fair going off the board, and I do have to say, I think Luther Burden is right there with him as a talent, but I think the Saints have a fair amount of yards after catching their offense, and they should just be looking for another outside force so that maybe Shaheed can go into a little more of a specialized role, if you know what I mean. That's just a really fun group of weapons. So I think, Ted McMillan to the Saints. Number 10, the Bears. The Ben Johnson era is underway, and I've seen a lot of people say, Ben Johnson coming in from Detroit, they could really replicate that Jahmyr Gibbs pick and take Ashton Genty. And I don't think that's a horrible idea, but man, watching the Bears this year, they really need offensive line. They really do. I think blocking is what they were missing most. They had that team built outside in. They have plenty of weapons to work with, and they have the quarterback in Caleb Williams. But I think for Ben Johnson's offense, that really had an amazing offensive line in Detroit, I think they should go offensive line because there are plenty of guys worth this pick, even though Ashton Genty is absolutely amazing. Easily one of the 3 or 4 best players in this draft. Very special talent. But I think you go offensive line here, and I think you just go with the most versatile guy in Will Campbell. Maybe they put him at guard, maybe they put him at left tackle, but either way, I think he's going to be a nice piece for Ben Johnson's offense. I think this is a fair spot for him to go. And at number 11, I think the 49ers should be thinking a similar way. Deebo Samuel is on the move. You could honestly sell me on taking Luther Burden here because he kind of has that same skill set as Deebo, but he's a little bit smoother as an outside receiver, if you know what I mean. But I think they should go offensive line. You know, you remember when they were healthy 2 years ago and they got to the Super Bowl, their pass protection was their downfall. And that is kind of a flaw in the Kyle Shanahan scheme. So I think you need to shore up that group a little bit more talent-wise. They can really make a run next year. They have a 4th place schedule. They should be healthier. But I think they shore up the offensive line. And I am actually not going to take the most well-known guy in Kelvin Banks Jr. or Josh Simmons, who's the highest on this board. I'm going to take Armand Membu because if you look at Armand Membu, he has been playing at right tackle at Missouri. And I don't think that you just draft a left tackle of Trent Williams there. I think you try to probably replace Colton McKivitz. And I think Armand Membu is just really good player at Missouri, pretty versatile. You know, he has some experience blocking the zone runs that Kyle Shanahan loves. I think it makes sense for them. And at number 12, though, the Ashton Jeanty slide ends here. We're going to take Ashton Jeanty to the Cowboys. We're going to bring that firepower to Dallas. You know, Jerry Jones is going to be excited, and for good reason. I'm not going to hate on this pick whatsoever because I think with the hiring of Brian Schottenheimer, he brings in Clayton Adams as their offensive coordinator. He's just really involved with the run game in Arizona. Like, that's the type of talent they're going to want. Like, the Cowboys have pieces on the offensive line that they can really develop and have a good unit. Ashton Jeanty is the next firepower they need on offense. Outside of CeeDee Lamb and Jake Ferguson, they're kind of short of weapons right now, and their running back room was so just not very talented this year. Rico Dowdle is a solid player, but if you bring in the firepower of Ashton Jeanty, that could really open things up more for a Dallas passing game that has really felt a little gross outside of CeeDee Lamb. Like, teams can just sort of key in on him, and there's just not much space for Dak Prescott to throw the football. So if you draft Ashton Jeanty and establish the run game, it really seems like their coaching staff wants to establish the run. He can really be the centerpiece of that identity, get more players into the box, and allow Dak to air it out more. So I think Ashton Jeanty to the Cowboys is a perfectly fine pick. We've seen that teams that already have a lot of offensive infrastructure are okay taking a running back this high, and Ashton Jeanty is easily one of the best running back prospects in recent memory. So Ashton Jeanty to the Cowboys, I think every Cowboys fan would be very excited about that pick. But yeah, I love it. I think in the Brian Schottenheimer era, that's a good way to kick it off. So my Miami Dolphins now at number 13. And listen, you could go a lot of routes for the Dolphins, honestly. You know, me personally, I would trade Tyreek Hill this offseason. I think to get off some of those aging players, those pricey players, get a little more toughness in the room. I would not mind taking Luther Burden here, if I'm completely honest. I also wouldn't totally mind going corner, but Benjamin Morrison has some injury history. So I think the Dolphins should go in the trenches. And, you know, they could go defensive line as well. Edge room is a little fishy right now with all the injuries. But I'm going to go offensive line. And I'm just going to take Kelvin Banks Jr. Because I know that we have a lot of guys in that left tackle room, Teron Armstead, Patrick Paul. But if you get Kelvin Banks, like, it just gives you more flexibility. He is a very talented prospect. So I think if you just take the best lineman on the board, that's a perfectly fine way for the Dolphins to go about things. And I would very much respect them taking anyone in the trenches because our football team is not very tough. And I think that would show a greater commitment to being able to play a more physical brand and not just relying on the firepower on the outside and just giving Tua a little more support, a little bit more of a well-rounded offense that doesn't just revolve around their weapons. So yeah, Kelvin Banks to the Dolphins. At number 14, we've got the Indianapolis Colts, and I know the dream pick for them really felt like it was going to be Tyler Warren. He would cook in Shane Steichen's offense as like that RPO tight end option in the receiving game too, but that's just not the way the board fell. I don't think they should go edge rusher. You know, I'm a big believer in the guys that they have there right now. I'm a big Laiatu Latu guy. Kwity Paye is solid. They have a solid defensive line. They need more help on the back end. Their secondary is not very good, and with Lou Anarumo coming in, and Malachi Starks on the board, we remember how successful Lou Anarumo's defense was in Cincinnati when he had a guy as talented as Jesse Bates just covering the top of the defense. I like Malachi Starks here. I like Malachi Starks to the Colts. Get some more talent in the secondary. I think that's a solid pick for them. And then the Falcons at 15. I talked this year about how dreadful the Falcons' pass rush was, and that's just kind of the result of taking Michael Penix over a pass rusher at 8 last year, and that's fine. But now they have an opportunity to get it right. They really do. But they really need some more pass rushing talent. The Matt Judon trade really didn't work out for them. So I think you just take the best defensive lineman on the board. And I think that they should just take Mike Green, because Mike Green was such a productive, talented pass rusher at Marshall. He flashed so much on tape. He had a great Senior Bowl. Like, that's a guy that could really make a difference, actually give them some genuine juice off the edge. So yeah, I like Mike Green to the Falcons. He's a big riser in this draft process. I don't think he has to go all the way at 8 to the Panthers. I do like James Pierce Jr. more, just because I think he's shown more against the run in the SEC. But I think Mike Green should be a good pass rusher at the next level, and that's what the Falcons need, right? So the Cardinals at 16. We are going to take another edge rusher because they are another team that's just really short of talent in that regard. But Jonathan Gannon has made things work, but I think he wants more talent. And I think Jonathan Gannon is a fan of some of these bigger edge rushers who can really stop the run. He worked with those kinds of guys in Philadelphia. And I think Shamar Stewart would be a good pick for them. You know, Shamar Stewart, another riser along like Mike Green. People love his athleticism. They love his athletic profile. They like how he was at the Senior Bowl. He can be a good run defender. I think that's just a solid pickup for the Cardinals. I trust them to develop some talent. So yeah, Shamar Stewart to the Cardinals. At number 18, the Bengals. I'm excited about this pick. This is very much a predictive one. Just sort of connecting the dots, you know, hiring Al Golden as defensive coordinator from Notre Dame, and the way their corner struggled this year, I think Benjamin Morrison is just an easy one to pencil in there. You know, get Al Golden's number one guy on the outside. He was so good for Notre Dame when he was on the field. There are injury concerns, and that could end up backfiring. But I just think that familiarity and the talent that he has possessed and the tape he's put out, like, that could be a home run for the Bengals. It really could. To have that continuity with the defensive coordinator and just the great corner that he is and the need he fills. For a team like the Bengals that's hoping to win, if he gets out on that field and recovers from that injury, that's a great pick for the Bengals. The Seahawks at number 18, I am going to go... I thought that he was actually going to be in the interior because I think a lot of people have him playing in the interior in the NFL level. I'm going to take Gray Zabel. You know, Clint Kubiak coming in, and really just how bad their offensive line was last year. It was really, really bad, especially on the interior. You know, they have guys on the outside that can play, Charles Cross, Abe Lucas, but it's the interior that matters. And Gray Zabel not only has the ability to play in the interior, he played at left guard for 2 years. He's also great in the zone run game. You know, Clint Kubiak, with his Kyle Shanahan influence, is going to want to do more of that. I think if you're going to want to establish the run game, getting a solid guy like Gray Zabel would be a great move for Seattle. I think they really need to get aggressive on the offensive line. Probably sign some free agents because they're always a better bet to make an immediate impact than these rookies. But I do really like Gray Zabel to the Seahawks. At number 19... for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, we're going to go with an interesting one, a guy that I think a lot of people are very high on, Jalen Walker out of Georgia. I look at Tampa Bay, and, you know, Levante David is aging. They don't have a lot of talent off the edge right now. They're good on the interior defensive line, but they could just use more pass rushing firepower. And I think with a guy like Todd Bowles leading the team, just loves blitzing as much as he does, I think Jalen Walker could be a real weapon in his defense. You know, the Bucs have a really talented offense right now. I think this is sort of a need to address just more pass rushing juice or just a real nice athlete at linebacker. This is a very moldable guy in Jalen Walker. We don't know exactly what role he's going to play at the next level, but I think he'd be a very good piece for the Bucs to work with. So yeah, Jalen Walker to the Bucs. At number 20, the Denver Broncos. This might be my favorite pick of the entire draft if it happens this way, because I think he should go higher than this. It's just a lot of the teams up here didn't have a huge need at receiver, in my opinion. We are going to have Luther Burden to the Denver Broncos. What a home run, man. I think the Denver Broncos, as much as anyone, should really just be focusing on getting more of that weapon ability in their offense because they have a great offensive line. Their defense was phenomenal this year. But I think with the success of Bo Nix, I think they want to open up their offense a little bit more. They could use more firepower after the catch. Cortland Sutton's a great ball winner, but he's just not that dynamic of a receiver if we're being honest. And if you can get Luther Burden as an underneath target for Bo Nix, a guy that can really do a lot of damage after the catch and just be a very nice, young, dynamic weapon, like I think he just fit really well in Sean Payton's offense. I think he's probably worth a top 10 pick. Like I said, I don't think there's a real difference between him and Ted McMillan, and I think he might actually be the better prospect for me when it's all said and done. We'll see, but I think Luther Burden is a home run if he falls to the Broncos at number 20, for sure. And, the Steelers at 21, they also need a receiver. And I am kind of conflicted here because I think Matthew Golden is the more exciting prospect than Emeka Egbuka, like with his ball-winning skills. Like he's dynamic. He has so much route running smoothness. Like he's just a really fun player. He had a great run in the college football playoff. But I think if we're being honest, like the Steelers, they're just always looking for their solid culture guys who can come in and make a great impact for them. And Emeka Egbuka is just a really solid all-around player. I think I've seen a lot of Steelers fans wanting him. Like he can really do it all, man. He's a willing blocker. He's a solid route runner. He's got solid hands. He's just a rock-solid guy that can make an impact for them. The Roman Wilson pick in the slot. Roman Wilson hardly played. I don't really know what's going on with that, but I think the Steelers could very easily just say, yeah, we're taking Emeka Egbuka, we're putting him in the slot, we're moving on from much emphasis on Roman Wilson as a young player in our offense. I think Emeka Egbuka to the Steelers makes sense, even though I think Matthew Golden might be the better prospect. It makes sense. That Steelers, Ohio State pipeline, there's something to be said there. The Chargers at number 22, though. This is an easy prediction for me. Colston Loveland, man. Jim Harbaugh getting his guy from Michigan that he won the national championship with. The Chargers have a massive need at tight end and really just getting more receiving talent for Justin Herbert. The amount of drops their tight ends had this year. Oh, my God. Even especially in that playoff game. Will Dissly, good Lord. And I think Colston Loveland could be a real weapon in the receiving game. And I just think Jim Harbaugh is one of the guys who notably gets his guys on offense. Like he hires coaches that he's worked with in the past. He brings players in that have played for him or his brother John. It just makes so much sense. 23 for the Packers. I think it's time for them to get a cornerback. Jair Alexander, not the guy he once was. They could just use more talent in that room. I think maybe Jahdae Barron. I haven't watched much of these corners, but I'll say this. A guy that I really like and I think looks like he has first-round tools is Azare Thomas out of Florida State. Look at this guy, man. 6'2", 198. That's a pretty big corner. He looks big on tape. I saw him against Miami. He had a great Senior Bowl. I think this could be an interesting pick for the Packers, especially a team that plays a good amount of man coverage under Jeff Hafley. Getting a really big physical corner on the boundary, that would be fun. I think it makes a ton of sense for them. It is a little tough for the Vikings because, oh man, a press corner is definitely what they could use. But I mean, might as well just take Jahdae Barron, even though he's a little smaller than a guy like Azare Thomas at 5'11". If you just get another dog who was really just successful this year in coverage, I think that makes a lot of sense for Brian Flores' system. I think we saw later on in the year, for the Vikings, they have needs on the interior offensive line. But really, their defensive backs are not amazing. It's more of what Brian Flores is able to do up front, mixing up all of his pressures, confusing the quarterbacks. If you get a guy like Jahdae Barron on the perimeter, that will just bolster things up a little bit more. I think the Vikings should be about, letting Brian Flores continue to pick his guys because it just doesn't seem like he is that coveted of a head coaching candidate. He's going to be around for a while, and why not just get a kind of surefire pick in Jahdae Barron, an older guy who just had a great year in college. I think he's going to translate to the next level. Houston Texans at 25. Okay, the Houston Texans are another team that really, 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 really needs offensive line. It was such a big problem this year blocking for C.J. Stroud. They just really could not do it. And They could also go receiver. Who knows where the future is there with Tank Dell probably out for 2025. Stephon Diggs is a free agent. I think Matthew Golden makes a lot of sense. Local guy would just really fit nicely with CJ Stroud. Who doesn't fit nicely with CJ Stroud? I'm a huge believer in his rebound this year. Nick Caley coming in as offensive coordinator. I think you might want some more physicality up front. They have solid guys at tackle. But it's just time to get some more fits in there. Think about guys that can play in the interior for you. And man, there is no one more versatile than Donovan Jackson. I think Donovan Jackson to the Houston Texans would be a home run because he has experience on the interior at left tackle. The versatility he showed at Ohio State this year was really a massive part of their championship run. As a guy like Jack McKinney might say, blocking is going to be the key. Blocking makes offensive easier, and I think if you bring in Donovan Jackson and really shore up that blocking, it's just going to get a lot easier for CJ Stroud to have time, and I just think it would be really cool. As a hometown guy, a guy who showed versatility at Ohio State, that Nick Caserio really likes his big prestigious program guys. He's drafted so many Power 5 guys, so many guys on some of the best programs in college football. It makes a ton of sense. You could probably just put him in at guard, and he would be a difference maker for CJ Stroud. Not to mention, he was there in 2022. He's played with CJ Stroud already, and that could really bring some nice chemistry, with Stroud setting the protections and just having a good feel for the player he is. It makes so much sense. Donovan Jackson to the Texans at 25. All right. Rams at 26. I think the biggest flaw for the Rams last year was pretty clearly their secondary. They have amazing things going up front. Their defensive line is just so awesome, man. Verse, Fisk, you've got Byron Young. It's just really cool. But they did struggle on the back end a little bit. They play a zone-heavy scheme, and I think you're kind of looking for maybe a longer guy who has experience playing in off coverage. And I think Siobhan Revel makes some sense. I have not watched a lot of Siobhan Revel, but I know a lot of people rave about him. And I think the Rams should just be looking for more high-level talent at corner that they can develop into a better secondary, just for Chris Shula's defensive scheme. And, it's going to be easier on a guy like Siobhan Revel to come in because the defensive line is just going to make his job easier. He doesn't have to hold up in coverage for as long. So I think he's in a position to succeed. And I think this is a need that the Rams should be looking to address, especially if we're assuming they keep Matthew Stafford. They're not worried about quarterback here. It's possible. It is very possible that they look at this 26 pick and say, man, if we really like one of these guys, I personally wouldn't do it, but if they really like one of these guys, they could take the quarterback just to get that extra year of the rookie contract. It's possible. It's possible, but I think Siobhan Revel to the Rams at 26 would be my pick as of right now. All right, so the Ravens at number 27, this is a pick I have not seen, but I am going to take Tyler Booker, the guard out of Alabama. I don't think the Ravens' offensive line is as good as some people might think. I think Lamar Jackson makes it look better. I think their run game success is a lot more due to him and Derrick Henry than their run blocking. And they have pieces, like at tackle. They have some pieces, but they also have a hole. Patrick McCarry is a free agent. He wasn't that good at left guard this year. I think Tyler Booker can come in and shore up the trenches a little bit more for Baltimore. Just make things a little bit easier on Lamar. I don't really know if there's a much better player on the board. They could just go best player available, but I really do like Tyler Booker. I think he'd be a really nice pickup, fits a hole for a team looking to compete, just makes things easier on offense. With free agents going out, he's a solid replacement. Lions at 28. So the Lions, it's hard to say they have real needs because their team was just a wagon until they got hurt. You could just say, because Aiden Hutchinson got hurt, why not get some more insurance on the edge? And that's true. To me, though, I'm just probably looking to take the best player available, and I do think that best player available for them as a contender is probably Nick Scorin. Just another really solid, good culture guy off the edge. He can really set the tone. He's a bigger guy who can set the edge in the run game, discipline. I think Dan Campbell would love him, fellow Texas A&M alum. We're really getting this trio going here with me also as a student at Texas A&M. But yeah, Nick Scorin to the Lions, I think that's a good fit. I think it just helps them shore up a defensive line that kind of got ravaged by injuries. A little more insurance, a little more to rotate in and out. Makes sense for the Lions as a contender. At 29, the Washington Commanders. And this is where I'm going to draft Matthew Golden. I think he should be a first-round pick. I really am a big fan of Matthew Golden's talent, and I just don't think that the Commanders are that dynamic at receiver. I think they need more talent outside of Terry McLaurin. If you pair a guy, an explosive downfield ball winner with Jaden Daniels, I think that could really help their offense. I think he could really fit in Cliff Kingsbury's offense. There are some parallels to the way Texas plays offense with the way Cliff Kingsbury has some of that college influence, and I just think Matthew Golden would be a very fun talent to get in Washington. Continue to upgrade things. They need more on defense, but I don't think there's like a clear defensive guy to take there. And now the Browns are up at number 30. They get the Bills pick for the Myles Garrett trade. They get to pick multiple times in the first round. That is nice, isn't it? This feels like a real rebuild now, and I don't think the Bills are too upset that they don't get to pick between this group of players. I think they're very much happy with Myles Garrett, and they send off that first next year. So what should the Browns do here late in the first round? Jedrick Wills is a free agent. It feels like their offensive line was not very good this year. Why not take the local guy in Josh Simmons out of Ohio State? Had a really good year before he got hurt. Very stout pass protector. I think this is just another case of Cleveland probably taking who they think is the best prospect available. That could be Kenneth Grant as well, but I think maybe a little more offensive talent would be nice. They have a lot to work with on defense. Maybe you take Kenneth Grant, but I like Josh Simmons as the Jedrick Wills replacement. Let him walk, get a little bit younger. A solid bet in Josh Simmons to be a good lineman for years to come. Kevin Stefanski, his offense has been at its best when it's revolved around what the offensive line can do. So the Chiefs at 31, coming off the Super Bowl loss, and the big narrative in that game, and it's absolutely true, their offensive line is in a bit of trouble, and they could be losing Trey Smith in free agency. Some people might say they should go tackle here just because the tackles really struggled so much against those edge rushers. I don't know if they would take tackle here because they took Kingsley Suamataia last year, and it's just tough to rely on a rookie tackle in a year where they're obviously going to want to go right back to the Super Bowl. I think they should take a guy that they really think can be a difference maker for their offense. And I think we would all agree that even though their offense was very efficient and they were able to run the ball at a very high success rate, it's still a need for them. I think the Chiefs might go running back here. I think they might just want to say, let's get Mahomes the best weapon on the board, open up this offense a little bit more, maybe invite more explosive plays. Their offense really was not that explosive this year. How about Omarion Hampton from North Carolina? He's a home run hitter, but he's also a downhill runner. He can bring efficiency, and he also brings value in the receiving game. We know how Andy Reid loves to get his running backs involved. I think that'd be a really cool pick for the Chiefs. Could also take the more local fan favorite in Caleb Johnson. He's another tough runner. Both guys pretty good after contact, but I think maybe you try and redo that CEH pick. We'll see. Brent Veach. Maybe he's scared off because of how that pick turned out. Last time they were picking a running back in the late first round. But Omarion Hampton, that would be a fun fit. That would make a difference for the Chiefs. And I just think that if they're going to make a change at tackle and not trust Kingsley Suamataia and maybe just try to upgrade that unit a little bit more, it's probably going to be in free agency because you can trust those veterans a little bit more to come in and be stout. So yeah, Omarion Hampton to the Chiefs, and now we are at our final pick in this mock draft. The final pick of the first round, the Super Bowl champions Philadelphia Eagles. Howie Roseman. He is always going to find a way to make a splash, and there's probably going to be someone better that ends up falling here because teams just overthink, and Howie Roseman does not. He takes the guys that the consensus loves. Maybe they overthink James Pierce Jr. That's possible. Maybe he falls all the way there. Could be Nick Scorin, but he's going to take these very productive, highly touted guys from big schools. And, there is a pretty well-liked guy coming from Georgia. Could be Walter Nolan, but I think they do like Moro Ojomo, even if Milton Williams leaves in free agency. And I think Josh Sweat is definitely going to leave in free agency. I don't think they're going to pay him. I think a team like the Cardinals and Jonathan Gannon and a guy who used to coach him might swoop in and offer that bag. So they're going to probably just be looking to reload the trenches. That's what Howie Roseman does. That is really what he does. And why not just take another Georgia guy, Mykel Williams? More of a raw guy, but he's got some physical tools. With the rotation they have right now, he won't have to play as much right away. They already have Jalix Hunt, Nolan Smith. Maybe you hope for a better year from a guy like Bryce Huff. I I think this makes sense. Mykel Williams to the Eagles to finish off the first round and to finish off this mock draft. Yeah. So let's lay it out all here. This is the full mock draft, and there is a lot to like. And I will say I don't have very strong opinions on a lot of these players. I need to watch more tape. This is not totally a what I would do mock draft. Like, there are picks I stress, like Shedeur Sanders. That's not what I would do. But I just have a feeling with some of these guys. You know, Colston Loveland to the Chargers, Benjamin Morrison to the Bengals. I'm trying to make some connections early on in the process, but also throw in fun ideas that I think would really help a lot of teams. So yeah. That is going to do it for our mock draft. I'm excited to get going more on YouTube. I appreciate all of you guys who are going to support me on here, and I just hope y'all have a great day. I'll see y'all later.